This video is proudly sponsored by Gamersgate. Download games anytime, anywhere. Visit Gamersgate.com.
Video games can learn a lot from comic books. After all, comics have been around since 1932. The two mediums share a number of common traits. They're both the choice of entertainment for the slightly more socially awkward. They often deal heavily with science fiction, fantasy, and stories of superheroes and supervillains, and they both have been falsely accused of inspiring maladjusted youth to do harm to one another. Video games, instead of mental illness, have been blamed for inspiring the school shooting incident in Columbine High School in 1999. Lamar Roberts gained notoriety as the Mortal Kombat killer in 2007 after he murdered 7-year-old Zoe Garcia and fabricating the alibi that he was mimicking what he had seen in the video games. Comics have been blamed for inciting belligerent behavior in America's youth long before the birth of arcades. In 1954, psychiatrist Frederick Wortham had made the bold claim that, "I think Hitler was a beginner compared to the comic book industry," in his book, Seduction of the Innocent. In reality, the American crime rate was actually low and holding steady in the 1950s. Violent crime wouldn't see an increase in America until the 1960s when the baby boomers came into age. But currently, comic books hold more clout with non-comic readers than video games do with non-gamers. Comics, without question, are considered an art form, but it was an uphill battle to gain that reputation, especially after what can be called the comic scare of the 1950s. There were comic book burnings, Senate hearings, and censorship crackdowns to combat what was no doubt America's newest pandemic, and the comic book industry took a blow that nearly destroyed it. Video game fans can no doubt relate to some of the events that have transpired, though we haven't seen a backlash large enough to encourage burnings. But we have seen a public outcry that resulted us in creating our own ratings board. In comics, it was the Comics Code Authority. In video games, it was the ESRB. However, comics are once again deemed socially normal. In most social circles, it is slightly more acceptable to start up a conversation with strangers about the swooping arcs of a graphic novel, like The Watchmen or Batman: The Dark Knight Returns, than it is to talk about the uniquely precise caricature that Grand Theft Auto 4 is about urban America during the Bush administration.
Why don't you show me around the city?
Fucking terrorists!
What?
Terrorists! There's been a big scare and you can't go across the bridges so good.
Why do you think that comics are more socially accepted than video games? Certainly there are a few obvious reasons. For starters, many feel since comics have been around longer and people have simply grown accustomed to them. They've become a collective part of our culture as they've been the inspiration to several television shows, movies, and of course, video games. Others feel that comics are no longer within the scopes of critics because video games are now here. Because of video games' interactive nature, a greater evil than comics has arisen, and the heat has been taken off of them. But I feel it's more than that. Comics are now considered an art form, something that video games are still fighting hard to gain in terms of recognition. I'm not here to debate whether comics or video games should be considered art. They both should be. But I feel there is much that video games can learn from comic books' 80-year-long example of what we can do to make a difference. For starters, we need to take our adaptations of video game stories more seriously. Every time we spout out another half-baked movie or television series based on a video game, it actually damages video games as a whole. People start to automatically ignore anything that is video game inspired, whether or not it's crap. Comics have the exact opposite reaction from moviegoers and television watchers, but there's a reason for that. Comic movies hire better screenwriters like David Hayter for their adaptations. We, on the other hand, can't seem to get our ducks in a row over what should be simple, breakaway slam dunk movies like Uncharted or Halo. Secondly, we need to start supporting our independent developers more. Indie comics are what kept the industry fresh over the past 30 or so years. Just look at the success stories of Dark Horse Comics and Image Comics. Just like indie comics, indie video games are what push our medium in terms of storytelling and artistic style. If we don't support the people who want to see something different in video games, we're going to be continually served the same reheated crap that we've been getting for the past 15 years. And finally, perhaps we need to draw a line down the middle of our medium and reclassify the two halves. Currently, everything is labeled as a video game, which is a total misnomer for the way we experience video games. Not everything we play is fun or whimsical, as the term game implies. Certainly, we enjoy our experiences, but not every game can be qualified as fun. Comic books went through a similar change. The loosely defined title graphic novel is often applied to longer, perfect bound, as opposed to saddle-stitched comics that generally address a more mature topic and storyline. Our more mature titles are all tossed under the video game umbrella. 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to ask Michael Salmon and Aria Harvey from indie developer Tale of Tales to comment on this exact idea. As video games are growing and evolving, do you feel the term video game is still appropriate? Their response was, "The term game is not appropriate for the way in which many people experience video games. They experience them as stories, as worlds, as fantasies. It would be nice to have a new term, but we're probably stuck with video game. All we can do now is be a bit tolerant about its meaning." Of course, the public perception of video games as something for children is supported by the term game, but we think this perception will change when the industry releases more mature titles. There are many non-video games already that are not considered childish: chess, poker, sports, etc. So why not video games? In the games industry, of course, mature is often a synonym for childish, as it only means that the game features lots of senseless destruction. Blowing shit up is not exactly a mature theme. I can't help but agree, but I still wonder if a slight reclassification of some of our video games can offer a fresh start for our medium. Whether you like the term graphic novel or you find it defensive and pretentious, it doesn't matter. That title helped push comic books into public acceptance. Once the public accepted comics as being a legitimate art form, it stopped being such a scary nightmare to non-comic readers. And that's what video games need. We need to be non-frightening to non-gamers. Otherwise, we'll never create our own Mouse: A Survivor's Tale. We'll never produce our steadily successful movie franchises. We'll never stop being the blame for juvenile misbehavior. That is, unless we learn a lesson or two from comic books. Now get off my lawn.